security gang, and happy Thursday from Hacker Summer Camp, August 7th, 2025. Packed show for all y'all this morning. Doing the show during Hacker Summer Camp really has some rewards. Some of those rewards include the fact that you wake up really, really early to do the show. The other ones are sometimes you get to call it a night because you have to do the show so early, a little bit earlier. And the reason I say that is because I'm not jet lagged anymore. Thanks. If you missed yesterday's morning story, you should definitely check out yesterday's story. It's straight up spot on. All right. With that being said, to everyone joining the show this morning, coffee cup cheers. Thanks so much for tuning in. We've got a packed show. And Europe is getting hammered with major cyber attacks. And I say that because the trend over the last 2 or 3 weeks is big European companies. Big European companies. We never really saw this before. But now we're seeing it a lot more. It's very common, specifically France, specifically Western Europe. We saw Eastern Europe really get hit with a lot of cyber attacks post the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the war there. But now we're seeing Western Europe on the economic level suffer multiple data breaches. We'll talk about Air France and KLM. We'll talk about Telecom in France, so much of that. A ton of vulnerabilities today. AI related, not AI related, so much there. A $25 billion identity company getting acquired now has a bunch of vulnerabilities. So who would have thunk it? So all of that and more on this morning's show. Let's get right into it, y'all. So here we go. So Air France and KLM, the French and Dutch major airlines, notifying customers that their personal information may have been obtained when criminal threat actors got access to a third-party platform used by the airline. The airline is saying that the data compromised was first and last name, not PII, contact details, not PII, service request, email subject lines, and not PII, and the Flying Blue loyalty program numbers. That's their frequent flyer. I would say that that's more PII, or that has a greater objective than all the other information combined. The sensitive information like passwords, passports, credit card information, travel details, and the Flying Blue miles has not been compromised, meaning they may have seen the program number, but they don't know exactly how many miles the customer does have based on the data that was compromised. The airline is warning customers to be on the lookout for phishing attempts, as likely with that information and the missing information, threat actors may attempt to get some more information in order to abuse it. Airline miles have significant profitability for threat actors. It's a very good financial tool. No additional details were provided by KLM or Air France over who the third party in this incident was, but they're saying that attackers obtained it breaching a third-party CRM system. That could have been Salesforce. And again, Salesforce was not breached, very similar to the Snowflake attack. I was with my friend Hyder from Snowflake yesterday around here at Black Hat and at Hacker Summer Camp, and that was one of the conversations we were just having. Here's Salesforce again, a big company being his name's being attributed to data breaches, even though it's just the platform. They did nothing to do this except the fact that some people weren't managing identity governance effectively on these platforms. So now KLM and Air France will join Adidas, Allianz Life, Cisco, Dior, and Louis Vuitton. We'll talk about Google here in just a minute because they're also part of this, but we're going to stay in Europe this morning. So Air France, KLM, beyond Lufthansa in Europe, they're really the largest airlines. But now the third largest mobile operator in France, it's called Bouygues Telecom, and I had to check it on Perplexity. I was like, how do you say this? My French is pretty shoddy, so I was like, I'm gonna double check it. They're one of France's largest telecom companies, its third largest mobile operator, announcing on Wednesday that a data breach compromised the data of millions of their customers. The nature of the cyber attack was not disclosed, but the situation was resolved as quickly as possible by their technical teams, and all necessary measures were put in place. I love when they say that. What necessary measures did you put in place that weren't there before this happened? And how fast did you put them in? And if that was the case, then why didn't you put them in before? Anyways, according to its corporate statement, the attack allowed unauthorized access to certain personnel data from 6.4 million customer accounts. Bouygues reported having 18.3 million customers in its annual results in 2024, as well as 4.2 million fiber to the home customers. It's not clear which segment of customers was affected due to the nature of this data breach, a report was filed with France's data protection regulator, the CNIL, and a complaint has been submitted to France's judicial authorities. It follows Orange, which we talked about last week, right here on the show. It's following additional French companies that have been breached. We've talked about it here on the show as well. The French cybersecurity agency ANSSI warned about state-sponsored threat attacks targeting the country's telecom sector. Obviously, this is coming on the heels of what Sol Typhoon did in the U.S., targeting telecom ahead of the election last year. So now we're seeing that kind of go there. Is this a weaponization of the same type of Chinese attack, or is it something more sinister? We'll find out here as time goes by. We'll keep you appraised to it. Again, I don't have the details of what this breach, how this breach happened to share with y'all. What I can tell you though is that what you're noticing is the targeted data is very limited in scope, and in fact, it's not really a full system breach, meaning they're able to kind of fool their way, and the way they're potentially doing this is they're really going after maybe low-level folks, hoping to move laterally within the network, and then they get discovered because detection tools are just really, really good. That's the one aspect of this that one can say, like, that's a positive, is they weren't able to really laterally move across the network like a few years ago, where you would see a data breach, you would see a lateral movement, you would see jumping into networks, you would see jumping into databases, and finally getting to some sort of crown jewel piece or ground jewel data that would get extracted, and then a ransomware attack would launch. Here you're seeing them really get discovered at the data exfil part without being able to put ransomware on the endpoints, and that just shows you the maturity of some of these organizations. It also shows you the evolution of our defense in depth strategy when we see breaches like this. Google joining the Salesforce instances compromised by threat actors like Scattered Spider, the tech giant saying their Salesforce incident was targeted in June and attributed to the activity to a threat group tracked as UNC 6040. They're saying the attacker obtained contact information and related notes for SMBs from compromised environments, likely like the Google Workspace type of stuff. Analysis revealed the data was retrieved by a threat actor during a small window of time before the access was cut off. And again, this goes to the idea where they're able to potentially compromise some employee on the help desk side or the customer support side, but then they can't move laterally, and then they're detected. And so they might be able to steal some data, and in some cases they weren't even able to exfiltrate the data, but they saw all of this data, and to be safe, to avoid the regulatory oversight of only limiting the scope of it, they'll go full scope and do just that. Google reporting that it found links to Scattered Spider and Shiny Hunters. The attack on its Salesforce incident was disclosed in an update blog post describing the UNC 6040 attack, and the company's now reiterated the apparent link to Shiny Hunters. The extortion involved calls or emails to employees of the victim organization demanding payment in Bitcoin within 72 hours. During these communications, they've constantly claimed to be the threat group Shiny Hunters. In addition, they believe the actors using the Shiny Hunters brand may be preparing to escalate their extortion tactics by launching a data leak site. These new tactics are likely intended to increase pressure on victims, including those associated with the Salesforce-related data breaches. Again, long list of companies. We talked about Pandora yesterday, Allianz Life last week, Cisco, Dior, Louis Vuitton, Adidas. All of them are there. And again, these are not ransomware attacks, but rather they're getting access, they're exfiltrating data, and then they're extorting the customers in order to pay them. We'll see how well that actually plays out. If companies don't pay them, these types of attacks tend to just be noise in the system at the end of the day. So, and when they're not successful and the success rate is really, really low, then it doesn't really, they kind of move on to something else. So we'll move to vulnerabilities, and we'll start with Microsoft warning customers to mitigate a high-severity vulnerability in their Exchange server hybrid deployment. This would allow attackers to escalate privileges and Exchange online cloud environments going undetected. The Exchange hybrid configuration connects on-prem Exchange servers to Exchange Online, part of Microsoft 365 that allows seamless integration of email calendar features between on-prem and cloud mailboxes. It includes shared calendars, global address lists, mail flow. However, in hybrid Exchange deployments, these on-prem and online servers often share some similar service principles, which is a shared identity used for authentication between the two environments. If you abuse this shared identity, attackers could control the on-prem exchange, could potentially forge and manipulate trust tokens or API calls that the cloud side will accept as legitimate, as it implicitly trust anything on-prem. Additionally, some actions originated from on-prem don't generate logs associated with malicious behavior in 365. Therefore, cloud auditing like the Purview or 365 audit logs may not capture the breach if it comes from an on-prem environment. The vulnerability does affect Exchange Server 2016 and 2019, as well as Exchange Server Subscription Edition. So you want to make sure you get those patched up. CISA issuing a separate advisory addressing the issue and advising network defenders who want to secure their Exchange hybrid deployments against these potential attacks, and it's been assigned to CVE 2025-53786, installing the hotfix from the April 2025 update. And if you're using the hybrid, then review Microsoft Service Principal Cleanup Mode for guidance on resetting Service Principal credentials. So you want to get that done. Staying with more vulnerabilities, yesterday here at Hacker Summer Camp, Zenity researchers showcasing their findings, how they found examples of how AI assistants can be leveraged without any user interaction, actually do attacker bidding on the chat, essentially generative AI bots that are integrated into your productivity and production environment. For instance, security experts demonstrated how integrations between Google Gemini's Gen AI and Workspace can be abused through prompt injection attacks for phishing. They also showed how last year they could hijack Copilot by planting specially crafted instructions in emails, team messages, or calendar invites that the attackers assumed would get processed by the chatbot. They've also disclosed similar attack methods targeting ChatGPT, Copilot, Cursor, Gemini, and even Salesforce's Einstein. In the case of ChatGPT, the researchers targeted its integration with Google Drive, which enables users to query and analyze files stored on Drive. The attack involved sharing a specially crafted file, one containing hidden instructions for ChatGPT with the targeted users. This requires only knowing the victim's email address. So in the Copilot Studio agent, they would engage with the internet. Over 3,000 instances were found where the researchers show how an agent could be hijacked to exfil information that is available to it. Copilot Studio is used by some organizations for customer service, and they showed how this could be abused. So again, showing you just how you need to put controls and defense in depth around those. We continue with Google releasing its latest Android security bulletin for August 2025, addressing multiple vulnerabilities across the Android ecosystem. Two major vulnerabilities, well, technically three, that you need to be paying attention for. CVE 2025-21479 or 27038 were reportedly exploited in the wild before this month's security release. They're joined by CVE 2025-21480, which was the Qualcomm flaw disclosed last month. The CVSS scores for the two first CVEs we talked about is 8.6 and 7.5, indicating high to critical severity risk there. So according to the Qualcomm disclosure, CVE 2025-21479 involves an incorrect authorization issue in the graphics component, which would allow unauthorized command execution within GPU microcode, leading to potential memory corruption. And 27038 is a use after free vulnerability, also within the graphic component, so you want to make sure you get that patched up. Akira ransomware is now abusing the legitimate Intel CPU tuning driver to turn off Microsoft Defender in attacks from security tools and EDRs running on the target machine. The abused driver rwdrv.sys, with which the threat actor registers as a service to gain kernel level access. The driver is likely used to load a second driver, hlpdrv.sys, a malicious tool that manipulates Windows Defender to turn off its protections. This is a bring your own vulnerable driver type of attack where actors use legitimate signed drivers that have known vulnerabilities or weaknesses that could be abused to achieve privilege escalation. The driver is then used to load malicious tools that disable Defender. So the malware accomplishes this via execution of the regedit.exe. This was observed by Guidepoint Security. As well, Akira attacks have also increased on SonicWall SSL VPNs. So you're seeing all of this kind of come together for a perfect storm. So you want to make sure you get these threats addressed at and again, a lot of this impacts SMB, but you want to make sure you get that addressed there as well. CyberArk patching several serious vulnerabilities that could lead to unauthenticated remote code execution, allowing threat actors to gain access to some enterprise secrets. The vulnerabilities were found by agentic identity security firm Cyata in CyberArk's Conjure, the open source secret management solution that is used by many organizations for managing machine and AI identities and for brokering secure access between various enterprise environments. Conjure is designed specifically for securing, storing, and managing access to credential certificates, API keys, and other enterprise secrets that are used typically in cloud and DevOps environment. This is very, very valuable for threat actors. The recently acquired company, CyberArk, acquired by Palo Alto, now dealing with these vulnerabilities. Multiple CVEs have been issued. CVE 2025 49827, 49831. Both are IAM authenticator bypasses. CVE 2025 49828 is a remote code execution. 49830 is a passive traversal and file disclosure. And 49829 is missing validations. CyberArk was notified in late May. The company announced the availability of patches on July 15th. So you want to make sure you get that patched up. And our final story of the day, a security vulnerability discovered by our friends over at Checkpoint, found that once a developer in Cursor approves a configuration file for an MSP server, any future changes to that file, including even a malicious one, could be executed without any further prompts from anyone. The design meant attackers could inject harmful commands into previously trusted projects, triggering code execution whenever the project was reopened. The flaw exposed a critical weakness in the trust model behind AI assistant dev environments, raising the stakes for integrating LLMs and automation into workflows. The researchers here are some of Checkpoint's brightest, Oded Venenu, Roman Zykin, and Andrei Cherikov. Both said that they set out to evaluate whether the trust and validation model for MCP execution in Cursor properly accounted for changes over time, and in a collaborative development scenario, such changes are common, and any gaps in validation could lead to command injection, code execution, or persistent compromise. To exploit the flaw dubbed MCP poison by Checkpoint, an attacker could insert a benign configuration file containing a non-malicious commands into a shared project. After it's approved by a collaborator, the attacker can replace that file with one executing malicious code. And since Cursor doesn't revalidate changes to already approved configuration, it would trust the updated file and run the new commands. This was reported to Cursor on July 16th, and they released the patched in version 1.3 of Cursor later that month. So you want to make sure you're on that version in your own organization. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow. Sorry, what tomorrow? Tomorrow's Friday. We'll be back Monday. Back in the studio on Monday. I'm excited. I've been in the studio for a month. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I'll have my espresso machine. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But it'll be great. Make sure to sign up at cyberhelppodcast.com for all the latest and greatest. Until then, have a great rest of your day, y'all. Thank you all for tuning in. And most importantly, stay cyber.